with me coming this close, right? Yeah. Without my mask? Yeah. All right? All right. I just want to make sure.
Consent is key.
Yeah. Consent is key. I want to stay on schedule. Nisha, we good? All right. Good morning, church. Good morning, church.
Good morning.
Giving honor to the Most High, pastor, and the beautiful congregation today. Now, I won't be in front of you long, amen. But I want to talk about time. A time contrary to ours, a colored people time. What if James Baldwin never wrote Go Tell It on the Mountain? We'll go tell it anyway. Of this oh so gorgeous scene. A sea of millions of black families brought to Jamestown IS. Arrived in an ocean full of magnificent cruise ships named after Jesus. Hallelujah! It's colored people time. No little slave shack out past the cotton field for mass to visit. Racism isn't a concept and paper bag games never existed. There's no notion of their American dreams. Their nightmare never lynched us and left us hanging in the wilderness of oppression. Injustice. There's no injustice in the justice system. So Keyshawn doesn't get life for an ounce and black boys never get murdered. Murdered with rags on their heads, Skittles in their pockets, holding their last breath in their hands while Brad pulls the trigger and still makes it home for dinner. Can I get a witness in here? So, my mama's mama never had to breastfeed white babies while her own go hungry. And her daughter's daughter never became an artist, painting on beautiful canvases made out of heartbreak, punching 2 clocks so her son could dream of opportunities she would wake up and never see in black fathers. In this time, saints, black fathers are the standard in America. In this time, saints, my father was always there for me. So I never became a great father out of some type of resentment that I had harbored. So there's never been such a critical need for Jay Wiggs' Pops documentary. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! There's no such thing as being woke. Because the pain was never deep enough to keep us asleep. God is good. Our own people never trade us like stock commodity. And self-love is simply living. America's heroes always look like all of us, so we never shun education. In another time, congregation, Stan Lee couldn't create Wakanda because America already praised our greatness. And so did we. So these books, we are the producers of history. These books tell lies. We are the producers of history, and these books tell lies. Look to your neighbor to the right and say, neighbor. Neighbor. Say neighbor. Neighbor. It is colored people time.
It is colored people time.
God bless you. My name is Mac Woods. My name is Cordney McClain. I go by Mac Woods in the poetry realm. I'm also an author, mentor, money coach, diversity and inclusion director at OU. And this piece was about an alternate universe. An alternate universe without oppression, without racism, a lot without crime. And what would the world look like? So I want to bring to you Mr. George Lee. He's a debate coach. He's a professor. Jack of all trades, subject matter expert in subconscious bias and privilege. And I want him to come up and let you know how you can execute in your organization to be the change that you want to see. So with no further ado, Mr. George Lee. Hello, hello. What it do, what it do? My name is George Lee, aka Conscious Lee. Don't forget the Lee. You're able to find me at georgeleespeaks.com for all booking and merchandise. Today though, I came to keep it real with y'all. Just say yes if I can keep it real with y'all today. Can I keep it real with y'all today?
Yes.
That's that. Okay. Remember y'all said that. Not right now, sir. Not right now, sir. Not right now. Remember y'all agreed that I can keep it real with y'all today. So we're gonna start off with this having a little bit of a introduction of what I'm gonna call the introduction to embracing the education of discomfort. We're about to get ready to have a conversation that is very uncomfortable. When it comes to talking about white privilege or power or racism, I recognize that the conversation, the dialogue makes people feel uncomfortable. With that being said, I would like for everybody today to embrace being uncomfortable. Embrace the level of discomfort
But I recognize that we're going to get into some uncomfortable work. And I want to remind you that unsettling the waters of our own racist assumption is uncomfortable work. Remember that first time you learned about the periodic table, how uncomfortable it made you feel? When you was learning about the carbon, the chemical breakdown of carbon monoxide, it probably made you feel uncomfortable, huh? Because you never came across that, right? Today, I plan on keeping it real with y'all, and I'm gonna start off by saying I recognize conversations about whiteness, white privilege, racism are usually conducted and structured in a way to always already make white people feel comfortable. Now, disclaimer, white people, I am not here to attack you. I am not here to make you feel guilty about anything you ain't did. I am here to be real with you and talk about the implications of white privilege. Last thing I'll say, discomfort rather than confusion is a good takeaway as long as it's clarity. So if you said I'm a debate coach, right? You see I talk a little fast, you see I'm a little passionate, right? If throughout any time I'm speaking, you have a question or something is unclear, clarity is key when you're giving these type of talks, right? Hey, Cordney, can you come over here and do something? With that being said, we're gonna get into an activity. This activity gonna be a little tricky because they're Rona out here. You know what I mean? You see we all masked up and things. You know, for y'all that don't know what I mean, the Rona, I'm talking about that COVID-19. This activity is supposed to be a group activity where I break up the group and I give you a specific demographic to deal with a specific racial category. As I look around, I see we spread out. I'm gonna try a little something different. We're gonna see how this works, right? What we're about to do is have a stereotyping activity. This activity is designed where I was supposed to assign everybody a specific demographic, but instead I will just say a demographic. And I want different people to just raise your hand and for you to just say what mainstream media has taught you about this particular demographic. I want to make sure I give a disclaimer. This does not reflect your personal views about this about this group. I'm merely asking you what I asked you in the beginning to keep it real about these 5 different specific demographics. Again, I know y'all work together. Your coworker, whatever they say, is not a reflection of their personal beliefs about this demographic. They're merely just sharing, right? So I'll give an example. I'll give an example because I'm a black man, so I'm start with a black man, but I'm gonna give y'all different ones, right? So it'll be like black men. What I know about what I've been taught about black men is that we're criminals. We got a lot of baby mamas. We can dance. We can jump high. See what I'm getting at? See what I'm getting? So it's the habit where we having a nice little activity. I'm gonna say a demographic. Native American women. Somebody raise their hand and just say what media, radio, history, news have taught you about. I'm gonna stop trying to move. I see you right there. Has taught you about Native American women. Do I got any? Don't be shy. Today is not the day to be shy. Native American women. What has society, what has history, what has the news taught you about Native American women?
Quiet and accepting.
Quiet and accepting. Man, everybody shake their head like, oh. Impoverished. See, these are stereotypes. You getting there now? Throw another one out. Mexican men. What are some stereotypes that are accompanied with the social identity of being a Mexican man? Hardworking. Cartel runners.
Doesn't value education.
Doesn't value education. Mexican men. Here, one more. Lots of babies. How about white women? Stereotypes that are contributed or attributed to white women. Come on, Bossy. What's your name?
Karen.
Carol. Shout out to Carol. Hey, that wouldn't, shout out to Carol. I like the involvement. Hey, my homie back there in the red shirt, man. You. No, don't turn around. You. White women. What has the world taught you about white women?
Privilege.
Privilege? Okay. Okay, can I get 2 more?
Whiny.
Whiny. Spoiled. Whiny and spoiled. White women. I want y'all to be thinking very critically when you hear these characteristics being mentioned about this group. All these groups. What about Asian men?
Smart.
What else? Disciplined. Rich. Said, huh? Controlling. Right. The last one. Then you see then we're gonna jump right into this first mini lecturette. How about white men? What are stereotypes for white men? Privileged, entitled. What else we got? Destined to succeed.
Smarter than anyone.
Smarter than anyone. What else? Shout out to Curl. Well, I hear one more? No? That's cool. We're gonna jump right into this first lecturette. What we should have been able to hear when we were thinking about, when we were kind of throwing out those racial stereotypes, is that of course, every demographic has stereotypes. I want to point that out. Be very purposeful with saying that, very clear. I recognize that every demographic has stereotypes. However, like my man Meek Mill said, I know y'all probably don't know who Meek Mill is. Meek Mill, a hot rapper from Philadelphia. He says it's levels though. He says it's levels to it, right? And when it comes to thinking about stereotypes and thinking about racial demographics, there are levels to it. With that being said, what y'all should have recognized that when we got to thinking about white people specifically, that demographics or that the stereotypes kind of work differently for how these stereotypes are inscribed onto particular bodies. What we're getting into is that the takeaway from this is there three takeaways. What we know is that even if you don't have a reference point for a particular demographic, what you've been told about that demographic will influence and inform how you relate to them. The example I would give is, I'm used to doing these workshops for different faculty and staff at different universities. And what I find is that when some of my colleagues that come from different European countries, specifically Yugoslavia, that there is usually not a point of reference to how they can understand particularly Black women, right? And usually when I do this activity for stereotypes, what I find is that my European, more like East European people, or people that's kind of not have a cultural reference to what's going on in America, don't know much about Black women, right? The last time I did this activity, the woman came to me and said, George, I don't know about, her group was Black women. She said, George, I don't know that much about Black women because I don't know any Black women, and all I know about Black women is what I've seen in the movies in the States. I say, well, write that down. I want to know what the movies tell you about Black women. And what we were able to see is that though she acknowledged that she didn't have any relationships, any engagement with Black women, she still had these tropes and these stereotypes about Black women being loud and sassy and angry and mad. The point of doing this stereotypes activity is for us to understand that even if we don't have, or even if we don't think about these stereotypes, they make up for the background noise in our heads, the subconscious level, right? What we also know is that they become the unconscious backdrop if we have no other context for interacting with the larger section of demographic, which brings us in a sense to how white people have an advantage over other groups. Now I sprinkle in a little bit of my philosophy. You know, he said I'm a debate coach, right? In terms of debate, we have two different understandings. In terms of debate, we have two concepts. One of those concepts is transcendence. Transcendence is what is. Facticity is what is known to be. What we find is that white people, particularly white men, have the advantage of transcendence. I'm gonna contextualize this point with a nice little old example, right? We know that since September 11th, the majority of domestic terrorism in America has been conducted by white men. But due to transcendence, when white men navigate the world, specifically America, terrorism or what other people that look like you have done is not inscribed onto your body. That's transcendence. See, facticity is what's known to be. Because 19 individuals that just happen to be brown, happen to be from a Arab country, Arab area of the world, that whole entire region and whole entire religion is now characterized as being terroristic. This is an illustration of white privilege. When we think about stereotypes, we recognize that many people are stuck in that factitious state of always what is known to be. I'm a 6'1" African-American male with dreadlocks, and I understand I got a little twang when I talk. I got a couple degrees though. Those degrees ain't stamped onto my forehead though, you feel? With that being said, I have to always be very conscious about how my black body can be caught up in the factitious state of being what is known. I ain't got no baby mamas. I ain't never been to jail. How human relations operate though, and how stereotypes operate, is that it becomes rational to inscribe something onto the body. Next slide. Hold on for that. Yeah, I'm right there. Bam, bam, bam. So, I'm gonna say this frank. I'm about to get into a mini lecturette about white privilege. White people, I say this very, very, very clear. White privilege does not mean you have not struggled. White people, white privilege does not mean that you ain't faced no trials and tribulations in life. White people, white privilege does not mean you have not experienced classism or poverty. See, me, I consider myself a textbook millennial, so I like memes, you feel me? I know y'all probably can't see that much, but right here I got a meme, you know? And with the reason why I like memes, because I believe in memes-ication. You know, don't get me wrong, I recognize that memes, and when I say memes, I know like the little funny things, sometimes it can be like, you know, a little joke. Other times it can be like some, you know, propaganda field thing, or it can be about empowerment, it can be whatever, right? What I recognize is that memes can be information, legitimate, or it can be misinformation. The reason why I call it meme-ication is because you should take it upon yourself to do some research and figure out if this meme is keeping it real with us, or if this meme is misinformation. What this meme right here we have is that white privilege does not mean your life hasn't been hard. White privilege does not mean that your life hasn't been hard. It means your skin color isn't one of the things making it harder. As a person that is very active on social media, on all the social media platforms, I recognize that when I start using this type of dialogue, this type of jargon, this rhetoric about privilege and power, you know what they tell me, the black man? You're being a victim. You're trying to be a victim. You stuck on victimization. Why do you love these victim narratives? I don't know if y'all know this or not, but 4th of July right around the corner, you feel me? And I don't hear nobody talking about victimization of red coats and, you know what I'm saying, pushing victim narratives about King George, right? What I'm getting at right now is how white privilege, because right now I like to give context first before I give a working definition. The definition that we have white privilege is the level of societal advantage that comes with being seen as a norm in America, automatically conferred irrespective of wealth, gender, and other factors. What this means is that white people can face classism and sexism and ableism, and you know what I'm saying, you can eat, sleep for dinner, and you know what I mean, you can face these trials and tribulations. But I'm here to recognize today that there are particular groups of people that go through things politically, socially, economically, based off their skin color. I don't know if y'all know this or not, but there's been multiple studies where the FBI and different American government entities have come out and found that black people and white people and Mexican people commit crimes at similar rates, as well as sell drugs at similar rates. However, we see that there's a particular group of people that is 3 times more likely to go to jail. The reason why I'm giving y'all these examples is because I want to illustrate how privilege operates and not just give it to you these terms like blanket wise. I know that, when you turn on the TV, usually white privilege is one of those blanket terms that's thrown around. They never define it really. They never kind of give us a context, never give us, really any type of background about it. So I want to make sure I'm giving that to you. Here's the next slide. So, to make sure we understand, my motto is education is elevation. You feel me? If the education ain't elevating you, then forget the education. So today I want to make sure I'm providing some education that will elevate us. I'm going to contextualize why we should care about white privilege in terms of higher education. Cordney, myself are both employees, just happen to be black men working in the system of higher education. One way or another, both Cordney and I are responsible or held accountable for what type of bodies can be let into OU and how those bodies are kept at OU, admission and retention. Consider this study from Georgetown about overrepresentation of whites in elite institutions. Although African Americans and Hispanic participation in higher education has been growing faster than white students, the report found that whites are overrepresented in the nation's 468 most selective, well-funded colleges. As a show of hands, who would say that the American public school system sucks a little bit? Can I get the camera to make sure we see the hands so y'all know I ain't lying, you feel me? What we're about to get into is we all acknowledge, we all love education. We're not attacking. I'm an educator, so I want to make sure it's clear disclaimer that when we say that when I'm acknowledging that the public education school system sucks, I'm not attacking educators. I'm merely acknowledging that the system and structure that is in place for them to be able to do our thing, it is not good. With that being said, show of hands who recognizes that white people, black people, Native people, Asian people are all implicated in the public school system. Next slide. The right way is usually the white way. That's a cultural understanding that I feel like is pretty cross-cultural. Whether you're in the reservation, the hood, trailer park, you feel me? Usually an understanding of legitimacy being correlated to whiteness or white people is something that is very typical. The reason why I'm bringing that up is that Georgetown study I just got to talking about also shows that higher education system does not treat students equally, regardless of their qualifications. So although minorities are unprepared for college, whites who are just unprepared are still presented with more opportunities and more likely to receive a bachelor's degree, what the report says. I came to keep it real with y'all. In keeping it real with y'all, I didn't want to give you a blank, a vague, abstract term, and then just dip out, you feel me? So when it comes to thinking about education, maybe it's walking back. I asked the question, I said, who agrees that our public school system kind of sucks? Everybody raised their hand. And then I said, raise your hand, we can acknowledge that multiple racial students are implicated within the public school system. Everybody raised their hand. What this slide right here is showing is that whites who are just as unprepared are still presented with more opportunities. What this means is, for the University of Oklahoma, maybe the unprepared nature or the, I'm gonna say, factitious state of coming from an inner urban public school system makes it where, well, University of Oklahoma might not accept these students because, hey, they're unprepared. And we don't want to put them in a position if they're unprepared to fail. However, we see that stigmatization is not attached to the kids that come from Enid. When we talk about white privilege, it is not just some liberal term that people throw around. It is a real academic term that has material realities for real lived experiences. So usually when white privilege is brought up, you know, we can call that like the fire, you feel me? Fire usually creates smoke, right? Usually the smoke that comes after the fire of talking about white privilege is a term called white fragility. To show, I'm curious, who's familiar with the term white fragility? Okay, a few. I know it ain't a term that's usually used a lot. As y'all see my motto, I like to give you some context first and then give you working definition. So let me give you some context. White people in North America live in a social environment that protects and insulates them from race-based stress. This insulated environment of racial protection builds white expectations for racial comfort while at the same time lowering the ability to tolerate racial stress. I'm gonna say this, Courtney. I know I'm gonna say this, Courtney. Listen. I'm not making no endorsements. You feel me? I'm about to just give you an analysis. It is ethical for someone to disagree with the movement, Black Lives Matter. However, it's an issue if you disagree with the statement that Black Lives Matter. Why am I bringing this up? We see that it says, the insulated environment of racial protection builds white expectations for racial comfort while at the same time lowering. For the past 5 years, we didn't heard the hashtag Black Lives Matter, and it's followed usually with All Lives Matter. What we see is this is an illustration of racial stress. Literally, the acknowledgement of the uniqueness of how Black people live can bring about racial stress to certain people where they feel like they're being attacked or feel like something's being taken away from them. Hold on. Hey, resource is important. You know what I mean? I ain't just coming to talk. So if you are very interested in trying to have a more understanding about white privilege and white fragility, I encourage you to check out this book by Dr. Robin DiAngelo. The book is entitled White Fragility. Why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. Why is it so hard for white people to talk about racism? White people, maybe this Aisha over. The book written by a white person, you feel me? From that perspective. I think perspective is important. Insight is important. Go to the next slide. With that being said, here's a working definition for white fragility. You know, I'll definitely give some examples of this. White fragility is a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves. Those moves include outward display of emotions such as fear, guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and leaving the stress-inducing situation. The reason why I evoked 4th of July is because many people are told to get out of the past. A past that is more recent than 1776. July 4th, 1776, we finna get ready to celebrate, correct? What we recognize is that this year, due to all the things that was going on, we talked about we've heard a little bit about the holiday of Juneteenth. We've heard a little bit about, you know, how we need to come together, be together. It's about time, it's time for us to come together, you know, focus on how we the same, you know what I'm saying? We all bleed the same. You put your pants on the same as mine. See, I don't rock that way though, you feel me? I came to be real with y'all, right? The reason why we have racial conflict, the reason why we got beef, it's not because we both bleed red. It's not because we put our pants on the same. It's not because we only one race, the human race. It's because power and privilege. That's the reason why we beefing. That's the one thing I want everybody to take away from this talk today about white privilege, is that this conversation about racism and coming together should be one that is structured by accounting for power and privilege. You can go to the next slide. With that being said, in conclusion, when it comes to thinking about white privilege, white fragility, racism, I think that it is important that Cordney started off the way that Cordney started off, because I recognize that many different people in spaces and places feel like, you know, poetry or ebonics or slang is either apolitical, or it can't be seen as being intellectual, or it can't be seen as being knowledgeable. That's why it's important that we use the language of our nurturers to try to give legitimacy in the way I speak, you feel me? I'll end with saying that in America, education is seen as the great equalizer, meaning that education is literally seen as a tool of freedom. With understanding how white privilege operates in education, what does it mean for America to understand education as the great equalizer while having all of these disproportionate things, I'm gonna say it like that, things that's placed in the way in order to make it where particular groups of people don't have access to education. Education is elevation. I'm George Lee, AKA Conscious Lee. Don't forget the Lee. I got my business card, something, Cordney. Give it up for George Lee.
This next piece I want to do, I'd rather not do it with the mic. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I say that.
And forgive me because I can't sing, but vibe with me anyway. Now, I'm a veteran. I served in the Oklahoma National Guard for 8 years, and appreciate it. And when I went in, I had already had my master's, already had a career, so I just seen another level of institutional racism and oppression within the military. That's how I came up with this. Some say freedom is free, though I tend to disagree. Some say freedom is won through the barrel of a gun. Oh Lord, tell me why, oh why do our brothers have to die? Oh Lord, tell me why, oh why do our brothers have to die? Soldier, halt. Right face. Rest. I got a letter in the mail the other day from the government. I opened and read it. It said, boy, you still a slave. It's been proven by the system that the Inca politicians is worth more than the blood of its victims. We became colonists and dropped consciousness. Population control. From food to mentality to us killing us. Gangs, prison, and drugs. It's all growing up looking for some form of love. The heart ends up cold, so with the heat, we fall in love. 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 America the beautiful. Oh, the home of the brave. Picking cotton overseas for child care and student aid. An old black man that worked all his life on the hands and knees told me, be careful, soldier. That's how you fall into depression. But I tell you, I still wear all this armor, but my melanin won't let me feel safe yet. I wear all this armor, but my melanin won't let me feel safe yet. Boy, you better sound off, soldier. I'm an American soldier. I will always place submission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade. Where's America the past 500 years when they left me? I'm an American soldier. No more genuine thoughts. I sound that dotted line. I'm an American soldier. Missing a leg and arm with praise for a medical discharge. I'm an American soldier. So honored that I'm homeless from being so mentally scarred. I'm an American soldier. So I shut my mouth, take orders, and die. And when that folded flag gets so carefully creased, so precise and handed to my mama, as the pain crushes her, she accepts sacrificing her only child for serving a country that never served her. Don't tell me what I'm fighting for on battlefields that we never leave. Don't thank me for my service now, but you want me to forget slavery. Don't tell me to adapt and overcome. I've adapted and overcame all my life right here in America. Suit up with all this armor, but I just can't feel safe yet. Suit up with all this armor, but I can't feel safe yet. Then tick, 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 boom! The brother exploded, the system pulled the trigger. One more young bouquet of roses, the soldier became a nigga. And they asked, wow, these people, these black people, how did this happen? How did this happen? The chair was set up by the intruder. Suicide letter wrote by Lucifer. We help tie up the noose that won't loosen up, but just loose enough to let us get accustomed to how they abuse us. See, they're used to killing black men. Like tradition. And we love to celebrate the same holidays. Backwoods. So going over my poetry, going over George Lee's, give George another hand. We'd like to open it up for any discussion, any questions. And if not, we have merch back. And George didn't bring his merch, but he has a website with and all his merch is accessible there. Again,
I have a question. Can you?
the social distancing got me messed
Right.
up.
Can you kind of give us some ideas of things that we can do to, make things better? Some ideas.
Are you talking about like as a place of employment, or is like what do you specifically?
Well, yeah, place of employment. That'll be fine.
Okay.
That's overall,
I think overall, I should answer both ways. I answer overall, and I answer more specifically for I think a place of employment. Overall, I think that it's very important for us to have meaningful engagements and meaningful conversations with people outside of our social location. What I also recognize is we're not going to be able to talk away or hug away or kumbaya sing away the problems of the world. I think we have to be very strategic about being able to get involved with power, systems of power, and being able to be very tactful in about how we politically, socially, economically try to push for progression. So I think having strategies, who do we vote for, who do we not vote for? Not only that, how on the local level can we, regardless of political affiliation, be able to come together to build, bridges and build, unapologetically truths, you know what I'm saying? And making it, and I say unapologetically, very intentionally, because I recognize that sometimes that we have to be very apologetic about speaking truth to power. That we always kind of making, I'm gonna say the whiteness comfort zone kind of perpetuated. The second way I answer that question specifically for places of employment, I think it's about having your mission, having your values, and having a way that those are pragmatically accounted for in y'all everyday actions. You feel me? So what that means is being able to account for microaggressions, implicit bias, civility within the workplace, conflict management, things like that. But having some type of conditioned standard in the workplace that makes it where particular jokes, particular standards, particular actions is not only frowned upon, but are literally kind of like punishable. With real consequences, and not just to treat everybody how you want to be treated. Not just some good white person kind of be able to say, hey, Carl's not racist. Carl's nice to me. When Carl nice to you, they don't mean Carl nice to all of us. You know what I'm saying? I think being able to have those real life conversations and making it where people are okay with being seen the bad person. I didn't mean to pick on you like that, Carl. I just used as an example. I thought we had a connection, so you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you address code switching?
Could
Okay.
you repeat the question? I couldn't hear.
She asked, how did you quote?
Can you address code switching?
Can I address code switching? And for y'all that don't know, code switching is like I'm gonna say it's a language tool that different oppressed peoples use. I'm a country southerner, if y'all ain't figured it out yet, right? And how I understand code switching is my grandfather told me that I can't use the language of the tribe with the king. That's what he used to always, that's what he was talking about, right? So I recognize I'm going in and out of slang and ebonics. Code switching is the ability to be able to articulate and be able to explain while also being able to use the language of your nurturer, or being able to use what the world has kind of been able to deem as being unintelligible, unknowledgeable, apolitical, things like that. I recognize that for certain people, particularly in this context, I'm gonna say black code switching. I recognize for non-black people attempting to code switch that it could put yourself in an ugly situation you don't want to be in. So I recognize that language is fluid. I recognize that language is something that we're always able to use and borrow from each other. But I think when it comes to code switching, a lot like the N-word, it has a particular jurisdiction, that's the word I would use, a particular jurisdiction on how it will be perceived and how it will be deployed. You know what I'm saying? So I want to make sure, does that answer your question about code switching? Cool. Any more questions? questions. Yes, sir.
I only ask this because I'm also a graduate from OU.
Hey, shout out to OU.
I just got a quick question. It's been a while since I applied for college. Is anybody still hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
I got a good voice. Anyhow, on the applications, do they still put down ethnicity and stuff like that and ask those questions on an application for college? My question is, why? Because there's really no need. If you're looking at a piece of paper or a document, which all of us do too, one of the things that when we're doing our work is we don't see what the color is when we're making an application. We go by the information in there, and color has ethnicity has no play in it. Why should that be even a factor in trying to get into a college?
Hey, today, first off, I like your question. I love your question. I think it's gonna give us the ability to get into some racial literacy, right? What we recognize is when we talk about the University of Oklahoma, though the University of Oklahoma is kind of characterized to be this great place of diversity, if we being real, historically, it is a PWI. That means it's a predominantly white institution. What this means is that when we think about the ethnic or racial standards, quotas that universities, institutions have to fulfill, we cannot erase the racial legacy of literally OU saying that if you're Native, you're Black, you can't get into it. So we recognize is that in the 1960s, you know what I'm saying, whether you Democrat or Republican, shout out to John F. Kennedy, he passed the bill. This bill was about what? Affirmative action. Affirmative action recognized that there were different barriers that did not allow for other people to get into that institution. So when I answer the gentleman's question about why it matters in 2020, the University of Oklahoma is still a predominantly white institution. What this means is that we have to be able to be mindful about the political, social, economic trials and tribulations that different people face based off of their ethnicity. This is an example too I'll give. In this workshop, I talked about how we all agree that public education sucks. Well, we see that there are multiple studies that show that students of color are more stigmatized for coming from a school system that sucks. So again, when you ask the question, why do we need to have ethnicity and race on the admissions? It's because race and ethnicity are literally creates structural barriers to make it where particular people cannot get into the school. And I go further. Remember, I gave the example of the rural white towns all around Oklahoma. I gave you an example of east side of Oklahoma City. I'm acknowledging that both of these school systems are funded by the horribly funded public education of the state of Oklahoma. The kids in Eden is getting the same fund sources, the same kids they're getting in the east side of Oklahoma City. We recognize, like my study said, it was a Georgetown study too, a Georgetown study, also a predominantly white institution. It's literally talking about how particular ethnicities and races are positioned at the university. I hope that answers the question. And I apologize if I got a little passionate, but I hope I answered the question. Did I answer your question? Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate y'all.
First, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. It is great to see everyone face to face. We've had some phone calls, we've had some Zoom meetings, and so got to see people from that standpoint. And I need to move a certain way. Okay. So I want to thank you all for coming out for that. I also want to thank Cordney and George for being with us today. And I want to acknowledge what you said first. Mic check. All right, I'm going to try to talk really loud here. I want to acknowledge what you said at the first, which is uncomfortableness. There are these discussions really have a potential to be uncomfortable for everyone, and so. But I think they're important conversations to have. You know, as we've been in this social distancing aspect, we've seen people that,
for social distancing, it means social isolation and really distance from one another. And they've struggled with that. And then we've seen things that have gone on out in the country as a whole that have really brought things to the consciousness in a way that haven't, at least in my lifetime, seen it. I know, now I'm a child of the 60s, and so I don't remember necessarily a lot of things from the 60s. But it's brought things to us and in a way that has never been done before that I've experienced. And so I think we've got a fertile ground here and an opportunity to really make a difference in the world around us. I have a poster on my wall. It's a poster of Jackie Robinson sliding into home base. And it says that a life is not important except in the impact that it has on the lives of others. And that's so very true. We all have an impact. Every life is important. Every life has an impact. Your impact can be a positive impact in the things that you do. It can also be a negative impact, but nonetheless, it's going to be important in everything that we do. And so I think that taking advantage of the opportunities that we're presented to make those positive impacts is something that we should really focus on and that we should take advantage of. And so in today's event for the DDS, I had an opportunity to talk to folks and say, what do we need to do